Hello, my name is Vanna Holder, and I will be presenting Module Week 3, Social Perception. Watching the news about violence and hatred towards people of different backgrounds can be quite alarming in the 21st century. We have abolished slavery in the United States, established civil rights for all, and legalized gay marriage. Yet, despite tremendous progress, today there are still individuals and groups who do not support inclusiveness and are resistant to change. We are still faced with stereotypes, racism, discrimination, sexism, and other prejudices throughout the world. The reason why this continues is related to intergroup, motivational, cognitive, and cultural factors. Through social psychological solutions such as intergroup contact, exerting self-control, and changing cognitions, cultures, and motivations, there is still hope that these problems in society can and will be reduced. As our societies become more diverse, various challenges of racism, stereotypes, discrimination, and prejudice evolve. From obvious racism, we now see more modern day racism, racism that is acceptable and socially acceptable to adverse and implicit racism. People can be racist without consciously knowing it. The implicit association test, IAT, measures implicit racism. First developed and tested by Anthony Greenwood, the IAT measures the extent to which two concepts are associated. For example, if someone is consistently slower identifying something good after seeing a black face than a white face, this would indicate a degree of implicit racism. Some people try to avoid interracial contact or appear colorblind to prevent race issues, but this type of behavior may do more harm than good. Theories of relative deprivation, such as destructive justice, introduces the concept of comparison. People do not feel deprived merely because of their expectations were not met, but because they feel that relative to comparison relative other, they are experiencing injustice. Some people feel threatened and become resentful towards other groups. Lisa Rosenthal and Sherry Levy find that thinking in a more polycultural way, that is, focusing on the ways that racial and ethnic groups have interacted and influenced each other's cultures throughout history, can be very effective in promoting intergroup relations. Intergroup, motivational, cognitive, and cultural factors are root causes to stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Groups that we identify with, such as our country, religion, political party, are called in-groups, whereas groups other than our own are called out-groups. Sometimes categorizing people in such a way can lead to dehumanization and racial bias. Research shows that stereotypes distort perceptions and cause resistance to social change. For example, in a research study about activists exposed that some people were less supportive of their cause because of negative stereotypes about them. The results showed that despite good intentions, individuals who actively engaged in promoting social change may inadvertently alienate members of the public and reduce pro-change motivation. This study demonstrates the damaging impact individuals have thriving for positive self-image and social acceptance. The terror management theory argues that individuals hold negative attitudes of outgroups since they are thought to threaten their in-group's worldview. People with social dominance orientation have a desire to see their in-groups as dominant over other groups and tend to support cultural values that contribute to the oppression of other groups. Some people may justify this as being self-protective. Stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination are the result of how our social perceptions classify people into groups, such as we use social categorization to identify age, sex, and gender. Even social economic status is used to classify people. For example, perceivers are more likely to categorize others as racially black if they are of lower socioeconomic status, if they are incarcerated, or if they are unemployed. Explanations for social categorization are self-categorization theory and social cognition accounts. Self-categorization theory explains personal and social identities. Social cognition accounts contrast with self-categorization in that rather than SCT's underlying meaning seeker motive, social cognition theories assume that cognitive structures, such as stereotypes, are activated and applied via context, independent processes that maximize cognitive efficiency. Categorization is based on perceptions and are biologically rooted. So as our societies evolve and become more diverse, the process of categorizing individuals becomes more flexible and complex. Self-categorization defines personal and social identities. Personal identity relates primarily to one's unique and personal sense of self as an individual with unique traits and characteristics, while social identity refers to one's sense of identity as a member of a collective group with characteristics and commonalities that are shared with other members of the group. Some people also demean others to enhance self-esteem. To achieve and maintain a positive social identity, in-group bias and minimal group paradigm may occur. However, there is evidence to suggest that social identification moderates the effects of the factors that provoke negative intergroup tensions. In a study by Shepard and Sigg, the objective was to examine the association between music preference and self-esteem, and to apply social identity theory to differences in music preferences and self-esteem. They found small correlations to social identity theory predictions between group identification and self-esteem. Their reasoning for such results were due to the sample population of young adults, music genre, and intergroup differences. Shepard and Sigg further discussed that measures of self-esteem need to be employed with care, and when so used, can uncover an association between music preference and self-esteem, and can test the theories of social processes. This study shows the complexity of self-categorization and social identification. Because there is no threat to their social identity, there is no in-group bias, minimal group paradigm, or threat to one's self-esteem. Intergroup contact has been proven to reduce stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Gordon Alport's contact hypothesis states that under certain conditions, direct contact between members of rival groups will reduce intergroup prejudice. The conditions proposed are equal status, personal interaction, cooperative activities, and social norms. These conditions led to the desegregation of baseball with Jackie Robinson. Elliot Aronson and his colleagues developed a cooperative learning method called the jigsaw classroom that reduced racial prejudice through interaction and group efforts. When people are on equal status with personal interaction, thriving for a common goal, the group dynamics of in-group, out-group conforms to a shared identity. Research by Park, Ryan, and Judd has shown that making perceivers aware of the multiple subgroup clusters that exist within a group can lead to a reduced tendency for outgroups to be perceived as homogeneous, and that repeated use of subgroups can result in the development of a more heterogeneous group representation. Education on multicultural views and learning to be internally motivated is essential to defeating stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. We all have our own perceptions of how we identify ourselves and with each other. We all strive for belonging and a positive self-image. It is essential and in our nature to form groups and influence one another. Problems begin to prevail when we devalue and oppress those who do not share the same views or identities. Exposure to diversity that challenges expectations should slowly change individuals, groups, and society's representations of those who compromise that society. Instead of putting others down to uplift ourselves, we should be learning and respecting our differences. Finally, all of you should be of one mind. Sympathize with each other. Love each other as brothers and sisters. Be tenderhearted and keep a humble attitude. Do not repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. This is what God has called you to do, and He will grant you His blessing. For the scripture says, if you want to enjoy life and see many happy days, keep your tongue from speaking evil and your lips from telling lies. Turn away from evil and do good. Search for peace and work to maintain it. This comes from 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 11, New Living Translation.